Hello, clan fans. Alright, I admit I missed a week. Unfortunately, I got really busy and I was not able to do a video for episode 4, but I will talk a little bit about it in this video, but I'm mostly going to be focusing on episode 5, which was a very big turning point in the show. And yeah, let us get into episode 4 first, and then episode 5. So in episode 4, titled A Soldier's Heart, we focus a little more on Henry and Julia's story. So in one last attempt to escape, Julia actually gives herself a rash with some poison oak, and Lord Lovett allows her to go to an apothecary. Brian actually offers to take Julia into town for the apothecary, so they are off, and Brian is no fool. He sees right through her ruse, and he tells her, like, hey, I know you're not ill, however, we're at Castle Leoch because that's where they go. And he wants her to deliver a message to Ellen. She's able to get into Castle Leoch because she's pretending to know Mrs. Fitzgibbons. And while Mrs. Fitzgibbons leaves her unattended, Julia manages to find Ellen's room and she's able to deliver the message that Brian is there to meet with her. However, Ellen is very hesitant about doing it because she had a talk with Colum earlier and he's still pushing the marriage between her and Malcolm. So there's just kind of that issue of like, this just isn't going to work and it's pointless, I can't get out of this. But Julia tells her, like, you might not be able to have control over your fate, but you can choose what you do tonight. So she actually convinces Ellen to go meet with Brian. And they sneak out of the little passageway that Ellen knows. And she meets up with Brian, and he wanted to know, like, do you really have feelings for Malcolm Grant? And she tells him, like, no, I do not. And my feelings for you are still what they were. And they just share a nice little tender moment before, of course, Dougal comes along. He's always spoiling everyone's fun. And so yes, Ellen kind of agrees with Colum at the end of the episode, like, here's a wedding list of all the people I want, and I will basically pursue the betrothal, and Colum is actually pleased with her. However, Ellen does have a little something up her sleeves because she and Brian are planning to meet up at the Beltane Festival that is going to commence at some point. So how that's going to happen, gee, I don't know. I haven't seen episode 5. Yes, so that was kind of the whole idea of that storyline. And Julia, she unfortunately does have to return back to Castle Leathers, but she and Brian have at least formed a friendship and he promises to help get her out of there. But unfortunately, the time does come where she does have to tell Lord Lovett, like, I'm actually pregnant with your child. And Mistress Porter overhears the conversation. Lovett is pleased. Mistress Porter, not so much, and understandably so. So that was the gist of that storyline. We also see Henry dealing with having to collect the rent for Clan Grant. And it does not go too well at first because there is a raise that Isaac has put forth. And people do not want to pay it. And of course, they get into a scuffle with Henry. And he loses a necklace for a second. And we learn that this necklace is actually something that Julia had given to him right when they were expecting Claire. And it's actually a sweet flashback that we get where he's having some PTSD from the war, and she gives him the necklace as comfort because it's an angel that's on the necklace. And later she is comforting him and he feels like he doesn't deserve her or their child, but Julia convinces him otherwise, like, no, like, you do. And he calls them his hope. It's a nice, sweet moment. And unfortunately, Henry is still not any closer to finding Julia, of course. He's misled earlier in the episode, and he's brought into the brothel, and it's another woman. It's obviously not Julia, but the lady's understanding and she hears him out. And yeah, he just goes through it in this episode. And Isaac almost wants his head because Henry comes up with the idea to get the tenants to pay more. He creates a lottery, and whoever gets chosen doesn't have to pay rent for a whole year. And people like the sound of that. And obviously the people who can't pay much, they'll just pay what they can. But then the people who want to afford, who are able to afford more tickets, can cover those who cannot pay the raise. So it's actually a clever idea on his part, but Isaac doesn't like the idea of anybody getting a year free of rent. But he does let it slide because Henry did make the money that he asked for. But he still wants to keep his eye on him. Now, I don't know, because I just recently learned this. The actor who played Isaac Grant, he apparently passed away. So there's uncertainty if he has any more storyline in this season, because I guess the plan was that they were not going to replace him. But I don't know how they're going to finalize that storyline. Maybe they'll just have Malcolm kind of take over, or there's still Bug, who... Ugh, I hate him too. There's so many characters to loathe in this show. But yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with that, but it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. Now, for episode 5, which is titled Needfire, we get to experience Beltane in Scotland in the 18th century, and it's actually, I got serious Renaissance fair vibes from this episode. It was interesting to learn the history of where some of the traditions, some of the decor came from, because the Ren Fair that I attend is during April, May, and they do celebrate May Day there. So it's actually kind of neat to see those connections, you know? So the episode opens with Ellen being dressed in a traditional gown of some sorts, and Jocasta walks in, and they kind of have looks on their faces, and at first we don't quite know what has happened. And I almost thought while watching the episode Ellen and Jocasta had some kind of disagreement, because it feels like they're kind of setting that up. But we do kind of understand the looks a little better once we see the episode. I kind of got from Ellen there's a sense of uncertainty, or the feeling of ashamed. But I think that's fair for her. For Jocasta, I honestly was not expecting why she was giving the look she was giving, but now I understand. But we'll jump into that at the end. So the plan for Brian and Julia is that Julia is going to help Brian get together with Ellen while at the Beltane Festival, and during that time Brian is also going to help Julia escape. And Julia is a little concerned because she doesn't want to get him in trouble, but he's like, I've dealt with worse. So right as they're leaving, of course, Mistress Porter has to find them. And Julia, aside from being in the condition that she's in, because at this point she's quite pregnant, she also has to stay because Lord Levitt's seer, I believe it's the same one that we have seen in season 2 of Outlander. I forgot the name, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the same woman. But yes, the seer is coming to do a reading, because on Beltane, that's when the veil between the worlds is at its weakest point, and it's easier for her to do a reading, especially for the Bairn, which Lord Levitt apparently has that done with all of his children. And that makes me wonder, dear God, how many women has he? I don't need to know. I don't want to know. Julia cannot go, and Mistress Porter, of course, lets it drop that Julia is carrying Brian's sibling, and Brian did not know this fact. It wasn't obviously Julia cannot tell him that's not the case because she has to continue the ruse. I do feel like maybe she could have trusted Brian with the truth because they had developed a friendship and an understanding with each other. So it's understandable why Brian was not happy about that. Obviously he doesn't know the truth, but he's still not happy to know that she's pregnant with his father's child. So yeah, that relationship and friendship is effectively ruined for now. So he leaves without her, and Murtagh comes along and they go to the festival together. And of course, Murtagh still has feelings for Ellen, so Brian is really at a awkward situation here. So attending the festival for Clan Mackenzie is of course Ellen, and Jocasta is coming along, and Ned Gowan is supposed to just kind of like keep an eye on things and make sure everything goes according to plan, because Ellen's job is basically to make sure that the deal is settled between her and Malcolm. And it's tricky because Malcolm genuinely likes Ellen, and Ellen, I think she has a fondness for Malcolm, but obviously she doesn't have like feelings for him, but she has to kind of play the role because that's kind of what her duty is at this point. So she does spend time with him, and they actually dance together at one point, and while they're dancing, this is actually a cute scene where I love how they filmed this, where suddenly like a hand comes around Ellen's waist and the camera goes up and it's like, oh, it's Brian. So that was a really nice reveal there, and they managed to like talk about like figuring out a meeting spot while they're dancing, but they also have to obviously pretend not to know each other while they're amongst everybody. But yeah, I think Ellen's smile gets really big, and that's Malcolm, of course, takes that as, oh, she's having fun with me. It's like, oh, you poor thing. It was a nice scene though, and during the second dance, Murtagh, like, he has been watching Ellen, and he's wanting to like talk to her or interact with her in some way, but it's not an easy thing for him, obviously. So Jocasta notices him, and she walks up to him, and he asks, why aren't you dancing? And he asks the same of her. And here's where I finally got confirmation for a question I asked during episode 1. Jocasta is married at this point to John Cameron. We learn she is not happy in her relationship, and they haven't conceived. So obviously we learn later on in Outlander that she does have 2 children, I believe, at least 2 children who meet unfortunate ends, but at this point she hasn't conceived, so there's just kind of like this discomfort in her marriage. And this is probably why she's flirting with Murtagh. And she tells him like, oh, I'm not dancing because I'm not a maiden, because it's supposed to be like women who are unmarried. But Murtagh still invites her to dance, and he's like, I won't tell if you won't. And they just have this cute dance together, and it's like, why couldn't they have been a couple at this point? It's so frustrating. Obviously we know why, but they just were never meant to be, and it's sad. At least they got together for a little bit later on, but they were just set up for failure, unfortunately. But we'll get more to them in a minute. So yes, after the dance, the dance was apparently like a competition of sorts to choose who was going to be the May Queen, and of course, plot asks for Ellen to be May Queen, and she gets to choose a king. Malcolm steps forward, and nobody else does it first, except suddenly Murtagh does, and then a few other men, and then Brian joins, and of course Ellen does pick Malcolm because of, she's playing the game. So yeah, once that is settled, she manages to find a way for Malcolm to get busy, like helping finalize preparations for everything. So once he is busy with that, unfortunately, she isn't able to get away that easily because Jocasta comes up with like an excuse for Ellen to hang out with her. And Jocasta knows that Ellen wants to go somewhere else, but she wants to like keep her sister like on the right path. But, and here's where I thought there was going to be like a bad situation, because at one point they're talking about marriage and Jocasta points out like, I somewhat blame you because I'm married to this man that I don't love, because apparently Ellen did have a hand in that. But she says like she just tried to like get rid of the suitors that were not suitable. So it's hard to say exactly how much of a hand she had in choosing John Cameron, but it's not something that leads into a fight. But she tries to like understand that Ellen just wants to do her thing, so she lets her go. And yeah, I like the relationship. It seemed like there was tension, and there probably will be, especially after what happens later, but I feel like they have a stronger connection than they might realize that they even have. But yeah, I just think they did a good job portraying their sisterly bond. So here is the best part of the episode. So Brian and Ellen are able to meet off in like a castle ruin, but right outside of it, they share their first kiss. And while they are kissing, who but Murtagh happens to stumble upon that, and oh, the look of anger in his eyes. So yeah, awkward. But he does not confront them. He walks away. They don't know that he saw them. And they go inside the castle. And can I just say that the cinematography in this episode is just gorgeous. Like, from this castle, they made castle ruins look gorgeous and romantic. Like, who would have thought? And then in the end, when they're showing the Beltane Festival, like, cinematography in this show is outstanding. If I had to give an A+ to something, the cinematography. They are inside the castle and they're sharing a tender moment, and they want to take things to the next level. And of course, Brian is hesitant because he really wants her, but he also does not want to ruin her in any way, her reputation, her honor. And Ellen says 2 words that get the scene going. She says, "Ruin me." And who would have thought in any time, any place, we would find that romantic in any way? Oh, this show, I mean, the whole Outlander universe is like, oh, we're going to give you the unexpected and you're going to feel things you did not expect. But yes, they continue to go further and they make love in the castle, and the scene is just really well done. I thought they did a great job. I will say one thing I will complain about. I feel like their relationship has been rushed a little bit, because I'm going to give a little timeline thing here. So in Outlander, Jamie and Claire's first time is not until episode 7, which obviously they had to go through with getting married, and yeah, they were forced into the marriage, even though they obviously had feelings for each other, but it was not by their doing. So there was a little more time for them to like have a slow burn, a build for their relationship. And they spent more time with each other, being friends. And that's where I think Outlander succeeded, especially with Jamie and Claire. the development of their relationship was just really, really well done. I feel like with Ellen and Brian, they did not do that. We have the meeting, we have their bridge talk, I'm gonna call it that, and then Ellen has a dream, which is kind of its own separate thing, and then they meet outside of Castle Leoch. That's all their interactions. So yeah, I felt like there wasn't enough to really build the relationship on to get to this point. Don't get me wrong, this scene is really well done. The acting is gorgeous. You're believing that they're in love, but you're not understanding entirely why. We haven't quite figured out why they are in love yet. With Jamie and Claire, like, you can see it. Like, they are growing really fond of each other. They're spending time. Jamie admires how intelligent Claire is, and Claire admires Jamie's bravery and how he's wise and unlike anybody else around Castle Leoch. But yeah, with Brian and Ellen, we don't get that. So I think that's one complaint I would have to give about their relationship. But regardless, the scene is really well done, and they have chosen each other, and this clearly is going to complicate things with the whole Malcolm thing, which Ellen is determined to find a way out of it, but she doesn't have an answer yet. Murtagh, of course, is not taking the whole situation very well. He continues to drink, and then he runs into Bug, who... he's one of the most annoying characters. He gets mad at Murtagh for, like, competing with Malcolm to become the May King, and he, like, beats him up because of it. It's like, oh my god, there were other men there, sir. He wasn't the only one. Just because he was the first one to do it, like... the Grants are bullies. I don't know about Malcolm, but the whole, like, Grant clan is just bully. Not great. But yes, this just furthers Murtagh's seriously bad day. He's having a really bad Beltane, guys. So he's in a tent, and he's just really angry, and Jocasta hears him cursing, and she goes to comfort him. And while she's, like, wiping the blood off of his face from the beating, they're just kind of having, like, a little talk about, like, Murtagh wants somebody to want him, and Jocasta says she feels the same way, and then that's when they begin to make out. They actually have their first kiss in this moment. So you can see how the feelings kind of reignite later on, the way that they're planting this here. However, the moment gets ruined, and it doesn't go any further because while they are kissing, Murtagh says Ellen's name. And Jocasta is immediately like, no, and she leaves, and she's very distraught from the moment. And the reason is obvious, because she feels like she's always had to compare herself to her sister, because her sister is the more desirable one, even though she isn't married. But Jocasta feels like she's been given, like, a bad card, basically. She's married to a man she does not love, and she wants somebody who wants her sister, and it's too much for her. She's probably always felt like she's had to live up to Ellen in some way, but she just can't. And she's trying to be her own person, but there's really no way to do that, especially as the younger sister. So we understand when we see her face at the beginning of the episode, she's probably looking at Ellen and thinking, I'm never gonna be, like, better than you in any way, am I? You're gorgeous, you're beautiful, you're wanted by everyone. Like, I'm not gonna live up to that. And it's a really sad moment for her. And she doesn't deserve to feel this way. It makes you happy that she at least gets some happiness later on that we see in Outlander, she gets to have her moment with Murtagh eventually, but it takes a little bit to get there. But yes, I thought they handled Jocasta really interestingly in this episode, and it was like I said, nice to see the bond with her and Ellen, but also just kind of like the slight feelings of jealousy that are there. Right before Ellen gets ready for the festival, Malcolm comes to visit her, and he gives her a little token that he had actually made for her when they were kids. And he's just being like this really sweet man, and he looks forward to calling her his wife. And obviously, like I said, Ellen has a fondness for him. She doesn't have the feelings that she has for Malcolm, but it's still going to be hard for her to break his heart in any way because he's being so sweet. So that's what they're kind of like building up here. Like, this is not going to be an easy thing for her to do. I feel like we are going to feel bad for Malcolm, and I hope he doesn't get to the point where he's like his father in any way. So hopefully not going to be the case, but I don't know. Now, the reading with the seer is a whole other story. So this was a very interesting part, and I really like this moment because there is validity to what the seer says in this episode. She's doing the reading for Lovett. She's like giving him like the usual probably. And then he wants the reading for the Bairn. And so she has Julia place an egg like against her stomach, and then she's supposed to crack the egg and it drops into a bowl of water. Interestingly, the egg has 2 yolks, and he's wondering, oh wait, am I having twins? And so what she sees is one of them is like a young lass with dark curls, blue eyes, but she's not yet of this time. Sound familiar? I thought that was a really cool moment that she's referencing Claire. Now, the second one is predicted to be a boy, and that he will unite the clans in Scotland's greatest hour. So Lovett thinks, oh, he's going to be a great Scottish ruler, and he's going to bring honor to the clan Fraser. I'm trying to figure out who this would technically be. Now, this is a theory I have. It's not. I'm not implying anything here by saying this, but it could be that she's talking of Jamie. Not because that's the child that Julia's carrying. Dear God, no. You know how messed up that would be. Oh God, no. No, I don't think that's the reason, but what if it's because of his connection with Claire that that's what she's saying? But yeah, I don't know who else it would be that we would know of. I'm kind of drawing a blank on that one because there are theories about who it could be, but the age doesn't match up. That's the thing. They're like, oh, it's Simon, and it's like, no, he was younger. Like, this baby would have to be about 30 years old. Unless they do some weird thing where they time jump and then come back. I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen, but yeah, there's just a lot of theories that aren't matching up. So she could be speaking of Jamie just because of the connection he has with Claire. Not because this is the child Julia's carrying. I need to reiterate that. But yeah, I don't know who else it would be otherwise, because Clan Fraser obviously falls to ruin with Lovett. Yeah, the only thing I can think of uniting the clans would be Jamie when they're about to fight in the Jacobite Rising, so it's hard to say. Some people say that, oh, maybe this is the 200-year-old baby that they were talking about in season 3. And maybe, in some sense. I don't know. At this point, I'm just gonna sit and enjoy the ride, because these theories are a little outlandish, you may say. I guess the one other thing I could mention is Henry has to bring this up with Ned Gowan about the letter that Lovett had sent the Grants. And obviously they dismissed it and everything, but there is still some slight concern from Isaac about the arrangement But Ned tries to reassure him, like, no, Ellen Mackenzie's reputation is pure and pristine. Not anymore, but yeah, it's just all leading up into a slightly ugly situation. But I like that Henry and Ned kind of also have like a growing friendship, and even though he hasn't really told Ned like who he's looking for, it's still like he's able to confide in him in some sense. So I do like that aspect between them. And it'll be interesting to see if he plays more of a role in like helping Julia and Henry later on, especially if Lovett is going to take hold of the child in some way, especially now that he thinks that the child is going to be a great ruler of Clan Fraser. Although Mistress Porter did point out, like, technically the seer didn't say that the bairn is yours. And she thinks that Julia's lying, and she believes she was pregnant before the whole coming to Leathers and everything. But I think he still wants to hold to the fact that the reading was about this child being great and will be great representation for Clan Fraser. So I think even if he believes her word in some way, he wants to hold to that idea that he can regain a good reputation amongst the clans. It's like, I don't care if this child is mine or not. If she says that this child is going to bring me out of ruin, then that is what's going to happen. Because in the trailer, it seems he wants to marry Julia. It gets worse. It gets worse. So yeah, that's something we have to look forward to episode 6. Can you believe we are halfway through the season? That's insane. It's going by fast, and it's interesting how far we've come and how far we still have to go. So it'll be interesting to see how the pieces all come down. But I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was gorgeous. Like I said, I felt like Ellen and Brian's relationship was a little rushed. It's a bit of a Romeo and Juliet situation, I know, but even Romeo and Juliet had more time together. So, yeah, that's just the one aspect I don't love. But I still think their relationship is beautiful and it will have time to develop even after the fact that they've fallen in love already. But, yeah. No, this episode was gorgeous. The whole ceremony was beautifully filmed. The castle scene, just the cinematography in this episode was next level. And I hope we see more of that. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with all the characters. But yeah, tell me what you guys thought of this episode. What did you think of the whole Beltane festival? And what did you think of Ellen and Brian getting together already? Let me know, and I will see you soon for episode 6. Bye, everyone.